On the issue of race, Mr. Gingrich was confronted at Tommy's Country Ham House in Greenville, South Carolina today. A man questioned him on his comments about having poor children work as janitors. Now, reporting from The Hill today says that Mr. Gingrich engaged the man. The man responded by saying he had spoken with the Reverend Al Sharpton and asked Mr. Gingrich to meet with the Reverend Al Sharpton to discuss these issues of race in his rhetoric in the campaign. Mr. Gingrich responded by saying, "Sure, glad to do it. I'd be willing to do it. I know Al." Have you heard from Mr. Gingrich about wanting to meet with him?
No, I would welcome it because...
Al, are you available Monday at 6 p.m.?
I'm available Mondays in this studio.
Right here?
That's right.
And I'll even make it better. I will go wherever Mr. Gingrich is. I'll meet him in Florida. I'll meet him in South Carolina because I want him to answer this whole question of blacks and food stamps, when clearly that is not the case, that we in the black community are synonymous with food stamps, how the president is the food stamp president, like when Barack Obama inherited this economy where all kinds of people needed more help. Certainly a lot of aid went up because of the Bush, and I might add Newt-supported Bush policies. But even more interesting to me, Rachel, is President Obama met with Newt Gingrich and I together and asked us to go on this education tour. We went to 5 cities together. We ended it talking with David Gregory on Meet the Press. David can ask him about it in the morning. He forgot to mention that whole tour to any of those crowds about you need to demand jobs and get off food stamps. He forgot to tell those kids in those schools, and we were in urban schools, that they didn't have role models. In fact, when we were in the Oval Office, he forgot to tell the president he was a food stamp president. So I think we should talk about all of this. I posted the tape. He talked about going to NAACP. He came to National Action Network's convention. It's on National Action Network's website. He didn't say any of that to a black audience. So I think we'll give him the whole hour. We'll meet him anywhere, anytime.
To be clear, what you're saying, I mean, the South Carolina electorate in the Republican primary, we do not yet know the racial breakdown of the Republican primary electorate tonight. In 2008, we can say it was 96% white. It is essentially an all-white electorate in the Republican primary. And you're saying that he's making racially charged comments to essentially an all-white audience, but when he is talking to African Americans in real life, he doesn't say the same thing.
The tapes are there on the National Action Network website. David Gregory, I'm sure, has the tapes to Meet the Press. None of this rhetoric was used. So all of a sudden, I think he should explain what is the difference between when he was on tour with Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan and me, and talking to these kids that he wants to be janitors and that have no role models but criminals in their community. What happened between then and now? Because are we dealing with someone who's just racially insensitive, or someone who's cynical, who would use race to play and use blacks as a backboard to try to score a shot?
There is a tremendous amount of cynicism in Gingrich's use of food stamps because of what he actually knows that his Republican debate audiences do not know. His Republican audiences do not know that most people on food stamps are white.
Right.
His Republican audience don't know that most people use it temporarily. And most importantly, his Republican audiences do not know what Newt does know, which is there would be no food stamps in America were it not for Republican Senator Bob Dole, who held the key to making the food stamp program happen. He made it happen, and which, by the way, from his perspective and others, it was largely an agricultural subsidy program, because where do you think the food is bought from? This helps create demand in farm states. So that's how it was sold there, and that's how Dole, brilliantly, by the way, sold it legislatively. And Gingrich called Dole for this and other sins, the tax collector of the welfare state. This is a long-held grudge Gingrich has about food stamps. He knows how they work. He knows who they work for. And to attach to the first African-American president the label of the food stamp president, which he never called Bill Clinton. He never thought of calling Bill Clinton that, and he had 8 years to call Bill Clinton that. He never did.
He even called George W. Bush some names. I mean, he was critical of the George W. Bush administration. It should also be noted he was pretty critical of the Reagan administration when the Reagan administration was in office, but he never used terms like that. What we're getting at here is a question of whether or not racial politics, racially charged politics, works in Republican primaries, whether there's moral opprobrium that ought to attend to that, and whether or not fighting about it is ultimately good for Republicans. I think that Newt Gingrich would love to talk to you on Monday, and I think he'll make ads out of it and raise money out of him yelling at you on TV.
But the problem he'd have is that if we gave other ads of him showing where he praised me as doing the right thing with the great civil rights issue of our time, he'd be running ads against ads that would show that was not the position he took.
Yeah.
And the problem is that no one has lost any of that footage, so he can do whatever. But since he said he would meet, again, we'll come anywhere, anytime, because I think we need to have that discussion now so he doesn't demagogue it if he's the nominee facing the president in the fall.
Well, one of the reasons why I think that he has gone after the food stamps is because it plays right into the camp of the Tea Party. The Tea Party thinks that there's this big spending that goes on out there, and damn it, I'm going to go in. If I'm president, I'm going to cut all of this stuff. And I think we should know that if the Republicans do get into power again, you won't recognize the next farm bill, where the food stamp comes from, along with nutrition, which, of course, plays to the minority communities in this country. But when it comes to the money, when it comes to the spending, I think that's also part of the point that he was trying to get across to people that, hey, I'm your guy. I'm willing to cut anything and even have a little hurt in all of it. And the Tea Party, they view that as red meat.
Let me give you last word here, Steve. Looking at these issues that are either coded racial stuff or just overt racial stuff, does that rattle around like a tin can tied to the bumper of the Republican car at this point? Is that sort of an embarrassment and a vestigial thing, or does that continue to be a central thing the party has to worry about?
Look, as a Republican, we've seen several embarrassments over the course of the campaign. We saw the booing of the gay soldier.
Yeah.
We saw the despicable Rick Perry ad where he went out and he attacked the gay community. And you saw the disrespectful attack on the President of the United States by Newt Gingrich, using words that he knows exactly, as Lawrence pointed out, what they mean and what they're designed to do. The food stamp president, it's inappropriate. This is a terrible thing for the Republican Party over the short term, the medium term, and the long term. We have an argument to make that the most compassionate policy government can possibly have for people, including minority communities, is a pro-growth economic policy. I have a very different view than my colleagues sitting up here of how we achieve that pro-growth economic policy. But we ought to, as Republicans, be reaching out into these communities the way that the late, great Jack Kemp used to do. And Newt Gingrich is setting the party back when he does stuff like that, and I don't like it personally.
Well, he'll have a chance in Florida because culturally it's a lot different state than South Carolina.
Absolutely.
And he's going to have a choice in making a...
And I must say this, do not underestimate, and I think I appreciate what Steve said, don't act as though everyone in the African-American community was applauding when I went on the road with Newt.
Right.
But President Obama and others have said we should reach out and try to work in a bipartisan way for education. Now, for us to do that and him to come back with this rhetoric, I think is a poisonous tone in the body politic of this country, and we need to deal with it.
Let the record show that the gauntlet thrown down today at Tommy's Country Ham House in Greenville, South Carolina, where Newt Gingrich said he would like to talk to Al Sharpton about these matters, has been taken up here on our panel here in MSNBC. The invitation, Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern.
That's
exactly right. I am really bad at cooking pancakes.